I'm your host, Richard Hara, and this is Social Impact Live, a weekly conversation with members of the Columbia School of Social Work community. Pleased to welcome today to our program two guests. We have, first of all, Irwin Garfinkel, who's, let me see, I want to get this right, Mitchell I. Ginsberg, Professor of Contemporary Urban Problems at the Columbia School of Social Work. He's a co-founding director of the Columbia Population Research Center and also co-founding director of the Center on Poverty and Social Policy. So welcome, Professor Garfinkel. I'm also pleased to welcome to our program today, Charles E. Lewis Jr., Ph.D. He's founding director of the Congressional Research Institute for Social Work and Policy, also known as CRISP. He's a former deputy chief of staff for former Congressman Adolphus Ed Towns. I think also communication director at that time. Yeah. And an alum of the Columbia School of Social Work, where he got his Ph.D. So, gentlemen, welcome to Social Impact Live.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Before we move to our main topic today, and sort of with the start of a new year, start of a new administration, and thinking about how social work might inform policy as this new administration takes shape. I just wanted to maybe just check in with the both of you a little bit on a personal level. And I saw from your bios that you both got your master's degree in social work, I guess before going on to doing your PhDs and work in policy. So I was wondering if you could just tell me a little bit about what you did, at that time, and maybe what sort of spurred you to pursue your work in policy. Professor Garfinkel, if you don't mind starting.
No, so I got my master's degree in social work, and originally I thought I would be in community organization, but once I got to the University of Chicago and took a course in social policy from Margaret Rosenheim, who was a lawyer, and then subsequently I had a course. Anyway, I just fell in love with social policy, and that's when I decided to go on for the PhD.
All right. Well, thank you. And Dr. Lewis, a little bit about how you made that transition.
Well, I was working at a church in Brooklyn, and I was telling these guys that they needed to go back and complete their education. I had dropped out in the 60s, and so I decided to go back and decided to go into social work, and got a MSW in clinical counseling because the idea was to get those skills and bring them back. But like Irwin, in one of my policy classes, I got bitten by the policy bug. And I realized that, yeah, maybe I could have a greater impact if I would go into policy.
Wonderful. So that opportunity while you were in your master's program to pursue clinical training, but also getting that broader generalist perspective, right? And learning more about policy and eventually making that your professional passion.
Yes. I was always into politics, so it just seemed like a natural place for me to try to make some change, because the work, of course, direct services work is extremely important, but we have to be at the policy level. They have to be supported with the resources that they need in order to get the job done.
Absolutely, absolutely. And today we're certainly going to be talking about change and policy and the things that we think could be done, right, moving forward with this country. Just noting that I have also somebody tuning in from Memphis, Tennessee, so I want to say hello to them, and also remind our viewers that even though we reserve the last 10 minutes of the program proper for a sort of Q&A session, if you've got a question, please feel free to put them into the chat now or as early as you want, so we can take a look and hopefully we can integrate them into our conversation as we go along sooner rather than later. So let me just put the big question out there for the both of you. So yes, we are at the start of a new year, a new administration. President Biden has identified a number of areas, obviously COVID being at the top of the list of issues to act on as quickly as possible, but also sort of restarting the economy, looking at issues of racial justice and equity, immigration, and it just seems overwhelming, right? All of the things that we've all got on our plate to manage and sort of just to tap into your policy experience and so on. I mean, if you were advising the new administration on, what would be a priority at this time, in terms of policy, what areas do we need to target? What are some real actions that could be taken, ought to be taken in order to advance an agenda for the better of our entire country? I mean, where would we start? I'm sorry, it's a big question. Let me go back to Irv. What do you think?
So I would begin with child poverty, and I think the Biden administration is on the right track there. The American Family Act, which is proposed by the Democrats in the House and the Senate, nearly all Democrats support it. There's some Republican support. That would convert the current child tax credit in the federal income tax. Right now, every child in the country, except for the poorest third, get $2,000 per child. The poorest third get less than that, and the poorest tenth get nothing. And the American Family Act would make that tax credit fully refundable so that every child got $2,000 per child. Plus, it would raise that amount for children 0 to 5. They would get $3,600. For children 6 to 17, they would get $3,000. That program will cost about $100 billion, which sounds like a lot of money, but it's actually very small compared to the benefits it would generate. For every dollar spent, we get close to $8 back. So $100 million per year, we will get almost 800 million, or 0.8 of a trillion dollars in future benefits for children, beginning with reductions in low birth weight, following up with reductions in neonatal mortality, better health as a child, better health as an adult, more earnings as an adult, better education, less involvement in child protection and the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
And they'll live longer. All of those benefits will flow from a child allowance. That child allowance would reduce poverty by 45% and will increase racial equity because Blacks and especially Native Americans are more likely to be poor. Their reduction in poverty will be greater.
Yeah.
That would be an amazing investment for the country to make.
That sounds like a very well targeted use of funds there, and delineation of policy. I'm thinking, Charles, your thoughts on maybe a broader agenda, and just sort of looking at the whole landscape, and what you think are some sort of more general priorities for
Well,
the new
obviously,
administration.
there's a lot to do, and his agenda is very broad. And obviously, there are more urgent matters that has to be taken care of. There are millions of Americans who are still out of work, and there are estimates of 30, 40 million who are food insecure. So we got to get amazed. But I would agree with her that if you're going to change things, then you got to focus on the children. Um, I think in terms of racial equity, which he's made a deal for his administration, and that is easier said than done. But one area I think that they could focus on is education, early childhood education, so that children of color do get an early start. Uh, I have another idea in terms of funding children with child savings accounts, but it's both the same to get them started. Get started early.
Okay, well, I see there is one question here that maybe we could sort of field from our audience. The first question is, what kind of federal program might help small businesses that are reeling from COVID? It looks like last year's business grants were poorly distributed. And yeah, I don't know if either of you have a specific answer to the question, but I think more generally sort of understanding, I mean, it's one thing to sort of craft policy and to push it through, as legislation and so on. But I mean, how does it get implemented? And sort of how do we make sure that it's effective, right? And as the audience members said, it looks like last year's business grants were poorly distributed. So what happened? I mean, was the policy wrong, or was it the implementation, and so on? I mean, what do you think of that process, Charles?
I think what happened was the whole plan was wrong. Okay, the way the administration handled the pandemic from the start, and so even if you give businesses money and you don't have customers, that's not gonna, that's not sustainable. So I think this administration is off to a good start in terms of ramping up the vaccinations and getting towards a herd immunity. And ultimately, it's a comprehensive package. You just can't give businesses. You need to give the businesses money. Don't give me, but you also have to help the states and local governments as well, because that's a very key part of the economy. So even if the businesses survive and the local economies are not functioning, it's still not going to do.
I want to come back to what Charles said before about we've got hunger is a serious problem. Unemployment is a serious problem. The child allowance that I described is only 100 billion, 1/19th of what President Biden has proposed in the relief package. I think everything he's proposed is vital. We need to err on the side of spending too much rather than too little. We learned a lesson from the 2008 Great Recession. We didn't do enough, and it took us just years and years and years to recover from that. So the Biden administration is right on target. I started with the child allowance. That's a temporary, by the way. It's only for 1 year. But in that 1 year, of spending 1/19 of 100 billion, we're going to get back nearly $1 trillion return on that. And the Biden administration will propose to make that permanent. Temporary unemployment assistance is vital. And if you put all the different pieces together in the Biden package, it will address food hunger. It will address poverty. It will stimulate the economy as a whole, get us back to lower unemployment much more quickly than would otherwise be possible. So we're on the right track. I believe that either we will get legislation on the relief, or it will be sent through a reconciliation bill. One way or another, we're going to get another relief, which is seriously needed for the bottom part of the population.
Well, that's my question. So, assuming, and it's a big if, that the rescue plan goes through in its current form, and the price tag for that is what, nearly $2 trillion, right? I mean, is there going to be money later on for something to fund like the child allowance that you're proposing? I mean, we were already inheriting a huge deficit from the previous administration, and is there going to be any money left over to do that? Or do you need to sort of build that into the rescue plan now in some form or fashion? I mean,
the rescue plan should be financed from borrowing. That's very clear.
Okay.
The interest rates are now 1%. So the cost of borrowing in the short term is close to zero. And so that's, in terms of the rescue package, that should be borrowed and increase the deficit. In terms of a permanent program, yes, we have to finance that. And the Biden administration has plans to finance that. We will be raising taxes on those with very high incomes. I personally favor a wealth tax as well as increase in income taxes. So far, Biden administration has not bought on to that. And if I can go back to another point Charles made about savings accounts, I think I would be even more ambitious. I think baby bonds would be a wonderful addition, very pro-capitalist, getting people who were poor wealth. That would be great for the country. Another great investment. Focus on the kids.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm just, want to bring Charles back in here because you're down in DC. You've worked with CRISP and also in tandem with the Social Work Caucus, correct, in Congress. And I'm just, so in terms of politics, I mean, how does this move forward? How do social workers, have a voice to try to advance this agenda? I mean, what's happening there, Charles?
Well, we've been advocating for social workers to be more engaged with the federal government, CRISP, Congress. In March, we will have a social work day on the Hill and a student advocacy day, where we normally would bring social workers to the Hill, but we're going to have to do this via virtually. But I see there was a question about how the social workers begin to find a path to the Hill. It begins like with internships, field placements. Doesn't have to be in Washington, D.C. Field placements can be had at where schools are, so they can do field placements in district offices. on various levels, state, local levels, but that's how you become engaged. Because we as social workers must be more proactive in engaging the legislative arenas and to bring our ideas and our values into the deliberations.
So you're talking about letter writing campaigns or giving testimony at meetings or hearings, things like that. What does it look like?
Yeah, not letter writing campaigns and giving testimonies. It's a response to something. It's like a reaction to something. I'm saying proactive, that we need to know who our representatives are because they're representing us, and we have to hold them accountable, and we need to influence them, and that means by knowing them, letting them know who you are. And we need to look at our research and see where we can bring our research into those deliberations. Like I said, for example, I'm working with Michael Sharon at the Center for Social Development and at Washington University, and he's been doing child development accounts all over the world. And we say it's time now to look at whether this works for our country. So we're trying to just get a bill introduced, and that starts the conversation. And then we can decide whether it's a better idea, or than baby bonds, or whether or not what is the best way to go about it. But it's a matter of, we're being aggressive at this, taking this to them, and not waiting for them to come to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me turn back to Irv. Just thinking about the polarization that we're seeing in the country and the divisiveness and looking at what's happening in Congress and so on. I mean, how do you think, how do social workers what role do we play in either reaching across the aisle? Because I do think that social workers do represent a more liberal position. I mean, how can we sort of bridge that gap?
Oh, it's a great question. It's a big challenge. I think we're as divided as we've ever been, maybe since the Civil War. But division often leads to progress. So I mentioned the Civil War. That was awful, but we ended slavery. There was lots of division during the civil rights movement, during the anti-war protests in the 60s. But again, that division led to great progress. So I think the same is likely to happen today, and I think the role of social workers could be crucial. We deal with everybody. We deal with problems that cut across the political spectrum. Mental health is a problem for rich and poor alike. We provide more mental health services than any other profession. So we're well positioned to deal with both Republicans and Democrats to move forward. So I'm optimistic. I like the fact that Biden is a man of the Senate and wants to try to engage across the aisle.
Yeah, have a comment here from somebody in the audience just saying more social workers need to run for office at all levels, right?
Absolutely.
To get politically involved and engaged. So, and we've got a number of questions about getting social workers into politics here. So I just, the issue here.
Let me on that. There are a number of social workers at Columbia who are really actively involved in the political arena. During the last election, social work votes, their campaign is helpful. There's a couple of Columbia social work grads who are running for the city council this year, and social work votes is going to be very engaged in the New York City elections. So yeah, we're in there too.
And because I know that you're both sort of field instructors for our students, for placements, it says, does Columbia have field placements for MSW students who want to work in policies? So what kind of training are you providing students with regard to getting into the policy track?
Well, I do external supervision for students in the policy, but I also I think it's because of the pandemic, I wound up with 3 students as interns, and they are actively involved in helping me organize our events in March and thinking about ideas of how we can network with other students across the country who have these same interests. So yes, Chris, that's one of our missions, is to get more social workers engaged in the political arena and also running for office. We do a boot camp in July, and Irv, you sent some students to that boot camp.
And Irv, your experience?
So I leave the direct practice part of the policy engagement to Charles. The people that I supervise, the students that I supervise, what I give them are research policy analysis skills. And that's the focus also of the field placement. So the students learn and conduct policy analysis. For example, last spring, before the pandemic hit, I had a class of students that did cost-benefit analysis of cash and near cash transfers. So they were learning how to do cost-benefit analysis. In this case, it was of cash transfers for children. So it was, they learned that skill.
I remember your cost-benefit analysis class.
It's fun, right?
Yeah, it was fun, yeah.
So, so we're running out of time here. We're down to our last couple of minutes, and I'm just wondering what you would want our audience to sort of take away from our conversation today. Sort of thinking about our role as social workers, about the needs of this country, and particularly the needs of the vulnerable, right? How we can address them in as effective a manner as possible, but also being politically realistic, you know, and what we can do, at least for the next 4 years, in terms of pursuing a more socially just agenda. So, yeah, words of advice or final thoughts.
Yeah,
Charles.
Chris will be launching the Social Work Democracy Project. This came out of a conversation we began a couple of years ago, asking, can social work help save democracy? And we presented this to the deans and directors at their conference, and out of that came this idea to create a project that would be promoting civic engagement and actually more public discourse, so that our ideas and views and research can get into the conversation and deliberations.
And Irv?
So I think social workers have a huge role. We have played a huge role in shaping policy in the past. We're playing some role now. I think it will increase. And I look forward to working with Charles. It's been a pleasure so far. I think it will only get better.
All right, thank you. So I'd like to thank our guests today, Professor Irwin Garfinkel, Professor Charles E. Lewis Jr. For joining us here today at Social Impact Live. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, I think that winds up our program for today. I'd like to just put in a plug for next week. We'll be talking about Black History Month with our guest, Alana John Charles. So hope you all can join us again next time. Thank you. Take care. See you then.